As the fight against ISIS heats up, President Trump is giving U.S. generals more leeway. The president saying the military now has, quote, total authorization. Joining me now is Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz. He is a former Green Beret commander, a former counterterrorism advisor to Vice President Cheney, also author of the book Warrior Diplomat, and a Fox News contributor. Thank you so much for talking to us. This is something that President Trump had promised on the campaign trail, that when push came to shove, he was going to leave the issues of national security to the experts. And you point out that military commanders used to complain about White House micromanagement under former President Barack Obama. So then how does President Trump differ in how he manages?
Well, Julie, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about the message that we've sent, whether it was the cruise missiles in Syria or the Moab in Afghanistan or the Carl Vinson aircraft carrier off the coast of North Korea. And that's the message we sent to both our allies and our foes. But, you know, what I'm really focused on is the message that is being sent to the U.S. military. You know, for the dropping of the Moab in Afghanistan, that was at the request of General Nicholson, the field commander. And I don't think that ever would have happened under the Obama administration. And if it did, it would have taken weeks, if not months, of deliberation for, you know, for Washington to give approvals. And the military situation probably would have changed. So, you know, the message that's being sent to the U.S. military is your commander-in-chief trusts you. You're the best trained and equipped in the world, and we're going to let you do your job. And we understand, you know, that you're going to have broad strategic guidance. Some of those strategies are still in the works, and that you'll execute that guidance to the best of your ability. And that's exactly what we need to see coming from our commander-in-chief.
How much more control do America's top military commanders have compared to those in past administration when it comes to making really big decisions, such as this Moab bomb? I mean, we've been holding on to this thing for years. It was only tested once in 2003 in Florida. They were waiting for this to be used for a very big event. We just reported that so far some 94 ISIS militants were killed and not one civilian in this. This is clearly an investigation. This is clearly intelligence on the ground that went extremely well. He is listening to his generals. How much do you believe that President Trump weighed in on when the timing was right in dropping that bomb?
I don't know that he necessarily weighed in at all. Look, he's given authorities to you know, his generals to fight these wars. And, you know, the last thing they need is Washington weighing in on what type of bomb to use. It was completely appropriate for the use that the generals provided for it. Or that, you know, General Nicholson used it for, because it's an incredibly remote area. I've been in that area of Nangarhar, as has General Nicholson, and he knows it quite well, and he knows that it's incredibly sparse and that he's going to achieve maximum effects and maximum damage. The other choice, military choice he had, was, you know, to send in ground troops or to try to, you know, launch pinprick airstrikes against these burrowed-in tunnels and caves, and I think that would have been much less effective. You know, the point here is that he was able to do what he's paid to do, and he did it well, and it's incredibly successful, and we're seeing that across the board when you let the military do its job.
Absolutely. And when you talk about these plans that are made by generals, such as Defense Secretary Jim Mattis, obviously the plan, the ultimate goal is to defeat ISIS, and it should have been the goal for the last 8 years, but in fact ISIS grew by the thousands in numbers and has managed to take over not Afghanistan, but not only Afghanistan, Syria, where we never actually went out there on the ground. Remember, boots on the ground. That was something that President Obama didn't want to do. And what happened? ISIS grew.
That's right. Was
micromanaging partly to blame for that, for ISIS growing?
Well, I think, you know, a flawed strategy, frankly, and a flawed approach from Washington and from the Obama administration was largely to blame, and that was completely turning our back on Iraq and completely leaving and drawing down in Afghanistan and then announcing that withdrawal years in advance so that our enemies were emboldened and our allies were hedging their bets. That said, once ISIS, you know, kind of exploded onto the scene, there was a large degree of micromanagement. Pilots were complaining that they had clear targets, but that there was a zero defect mentality, zero civilian casualties. If there was even a hint or even the prospect of a civilian casualty, they weren't allowed to drop. And that allowed, ironically, ISIS to continue to grow and kill even more civilians. So I do think it's to blame. And, you know, Julie, I just want to say very quickly, there's a lot of criticism that we're over-militarizing our strategy and our approach here. But diplomacy and military force have to move hand in hand. And things like governance, democracy, and development cannot grow and take hold in an area where people are literally getting their heads cut off, that their families are threatened, government officials are being assassinated. You know, in that type of environment, these other soft power initiatives can't take hold, and you have to move those in tandem, whether it's at the village level or it's at the strategic, nation's capital level. And we're seeing that. We're seeing Vice President Pence employed, Tillerson, the president meeting with heads of state at the same time that our diplomats sit down at the table. They know they have the weight of the United States military standing behind them in a way that we haven't had the last 8 years.
Yeah, I got to give it to the military. I got to give it to the generals. I mean, just incredibly impressive to see them pull this all together under 90 days and to accomplish so much is pretty remarkable. Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz, thank you so much. Excellent insight. Appreciate it.